While withholding exam results is an inconvenience, going on strike would shut the whole system down.
The academics have had enough, and they are now saying that they have to seriously question whether they will reopen universities in second semester if they haven't got their pay rise.
Academics are looking for a pay rise of up to $4,000 for a first-year tutor, $7,000 on the base salary for a lecturer and $8,000 for a professor. According to the union, salaries have dropped 28% in real terms in the last 20 years. At a meeting today, academics voted to defer further action till the Industrial Commission sits on the matter on Friday. About 25% of staff will keep withholding exam results. The academics' pay dispute dates back to 1989 and Accord Mark 5. The union says 2 years of negotiations have achieved little and a strike is their last option. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
Professor Jones likens his present campaign to the long one in the 60s and 70s over seatbelts in cars.
It was many years before we were able to get the legislators to actually enact a rule to say that people had to wear safety belts. And there was a group of people who said that if you were in a car and had a safety belt and there was a fire, you would be incinerated. And that's the same sort of story that's going on now.
The most recent serious bus crash was that at Talbingo in the Snowy Mountains. The young footballers survived. No seatbelts meant they were all thrown out.
The issue there is, of course, that the bus was inherently unsafe, that the roof opened up like a sardine can. Now, that's no excuse for not wearing safety belts.
Right, so your campaign goes further than just the belts. It goes to the manufacture, the design of buses.
It's the whole design of the bus, the prevention of the roof coming off, the rollover protection and side intrusion panels and the strength of the floor and lap sash belts integrated into seats.
The high cost of improved safety has been a factor, but Professor Jones now says coach operators are coming around to his way of thinking.
They want to see their coaches as being safe, and there is a crisis in confidence in the public, people using their coaches, and that they are fearful now that if they go in the coach it might have an accident. And I think that the competition with the airlines at the moment, they would very much like to have their coaches seen as being safe.
Despite a national advertising campaign, it seems about 25% of people are leaving it to the last minute. Today, the tax office put out a warning to the public. Tomorrow is D-Day.
It's not compulsory. If they choose not to quote, they face the possibility of having tax deducted from their dividends or interest at the rate of 48.25%.
But while people who don't advise the bank or financial institution of their number will lose some interest, that money can be reclaimed in your tax return the following year. Some believe it's just Big Brother invading personal information. The tax office disagrees, saying the system is designed to stop people ripping off the tax laws.
People have to remember that it is just another legitimate way of ensuring that all people accept their tax responsibility.
Most pensioners and children under 16 are exempt from the rule. People who earn less than $120 interest per account are also unaffected. If you need more information, call the tax file hotline on 008 021 329. That number again, 008 021 329.
There is not a more explosive front rower in the Winfield Cup than Mark Sargent, and the Green Machine from the capital was looking for a place to lie down after Sargent made a mess of their ranks on Sunday at the International Sports Centre. And with the Knights now out of the hunt for the semi-finals and talk of an exodus of players from the camp, the feelers are out for Sargent's services. And at the forefront of clubs chasing the big prop is Parramatta. Coach Mick Cronin has rung the Knights coach Alan McMahon asking permission for the Eels to talk to Sargent after this Sunday's match, and that request has been granted.
At this stage of my career, I've got to listen to all the options that are available to me. I'm near 27, so probably getting a bit long in the tooth, but I've got to listen to them, and I'll be quite happy to hear whatever Mick's got to say.
Sargent is the first international of the Newcastle Knights, and they also, for more reasons than one, are more than keen to retain his services.
We've also entered negotiations with Sargent. We've been talking with Sargent and his manager over the last week or so. We're waiting for them to come back to us with some details, and it's our intention to make sure Sarge is a Knight and stays a Knight for the next 3 years, which is what he's expressed his wishes are to be.
But with the almighty dollar having such an influence on player movements within the Winfield Cup, the Knights are going to have to cough up plenty to hold Sarge. But there is one thing in their favour: Mark is an Overcastrian, and that's what they're banking on.
If everything goes all right, negotiations-wise here, I'd be happy to stay at the club.
Nesca House was once owned by Newcastle City Council, but now it wants to buy the building back from Shortland Electricity. At an in-camera meeting this week, aldermen decided to buy the King Street office block and to begin negotiations with Shortland officials. But Shortland Electricity General Manager Warren Elliott says they haven't even considered the offer yet.
We are keen to look at any prospective buyer, but that will have to be evaluated against what the offer might be, and we may well make a counter-offer.
Nesca House has had a price tag of $3.5 million with no takers, but the town clerk, Barry Lewis, isn't saying for how much or when the council is looking at buying the building. And those unanswered questions worry the Newcastle Civic Association. The association's Rose Cogger says if council is looking for more office space and using its $2 million earthquake insurance money, it should first consider the Frederick Ash building.
Well, the Frederick Ash building is already attached to the administration centre, so common sense should prevail, and council should get a costing on the recycling of the Frederick Ash, and the $2 million should be spent on that building.
The fate of the Frederick Ash building and others in the civic redevelopment plan has been the focus of talks between council, unions and community groups. A development consultant is to be appointed to help map out a clearer picture for the civic precinct. And Phil Darby from the Building Trades Group believes the consultant will put an end to the bickering over the civic plans and make it more attractive to a developer.
The council is now saying that that area is going to be developed. They are not going to pull buildings down and just leave holes in the ground. Not only that, they are putting a coordinator in, listening to the people, and that's what the trade union movement was all about. And as a consequence to that, we then have a proposal to put forward to developers.
It was a far cry from last April's launching ceremony. No politicians or champagne to be seen, just a group of workers with their beer and memories. When Carrington slipways collapsed late last year, ANL contracted the tradesmen needed to finish the Sea Road Tamar. Most were dismissed after the official launch, but about 45 were kept on while the vessel was fitted and trialled. Now they too must face the prospect of unemployment. The ship cast off just after 3 o'clock this afternoon, leaving some mixed emotions in its wake.
It's a tremendous achievement for everybody involved in the building of the vessel.
Pretty sorry, I suppose. It's been a good 20 long years.
They built one in Singapore and they should leave this one for dead.
The $36 million container vessel now heads for dry dock in Melbourne. Its builders face a less certain future. The Hunter's shipbuilding industry has finally sunk without a trace. Last Sunday at the International Sports Centre, a much improved performance by Newcastle against the reigning premiers has left them in a happier frame of mind going in against the Parramatta Eels. Although beaten, the signs were there that the Knights may have turned the corner. Another added bonus is they are returning to the stadium of their biggest triumph, the Nissan Sevens, earlier in the year, and the man of that series, Mark Glanville, is quietly confident of victory.
I guess individually each of us have said that we'll win, you know, and try and play our best, and you never know what could happen.
Tyler's second rower, Paul Marquette, has fought his way back from a broken leg and will take his place in the starting lineup.
It's good to be starting again. 11 weeks off altogether, so it's good to be on the first lineup and have another run. I hope I can get back to my usual form, you know, and have the work rate up high and do my best for the team, yeah.
Although well down the list, Parramatta always pose a problem for the Newcastle Knights. That's something that hasn't missed the attention of the skipper, Michael Hagan.
We like to win as much as anyone, and I thought we played well enough last week not to have won, but we've had another good week this week, and while Parramatta have come good in the last couple of weeks, we think we can match them and hopefully come away with a win at Parramatta Stadium.
While there is a serious build-up to Sunday's match in Sydney, Eagle League watchers shouldn't rush to any conclusions as to who will handle the kicking duties. Will it be Fulmer? Or what about Glanville? The smart money's on John Schuster, but you never know.
There you go, Ada, you can grab that if you have your drink.
Thieves broke in through a rear door sometime during the night and proceeded to ransack the shop. A picture of owner Stephen Brown was found pinned to a shelf by a dart. He believes local juveniles were responsible for the robbery, the fourth on the premises in less than 3 years.
Other than spending the night here, you know, there's not much more I can do. I've got bars on the windows, the doors are securely locked, security lighting out the front. The next step, I would imagine, would be a back-to-base burglar alarm.
It's not yet known exactly what was stolen. The thieves took a small amount of money from the shop's cash register, and several football jumpers and sports shoes are missing.
There are so many product lines and so many items that you just can't really work out what's gone until maybe 3 months down the track when suddenly it's not there.
Scientific police found fingerprints on both the cash drawer and a bottle of beer taken from the shop's fridge. Investigations are continuing.
The big wet set in on the long weekend this month, and one of the sports that suffered badly was bowls, with the final of the state pennants being washed out. On resumption today in the number 1 division, Cahaiba Club, led by Darby Ross and his 16-man band, had to contend with Marylands in the semi-final, and with a handy lead on the commencement of the day's activities, played steady bowls to win their way through to the decider, 86 shots to 72. Their opponents were to be Belrose from Sydney, who proved just a little too strong for Rydalmere Central in the other semi-final. With a very experienced lineup which included informed bowler Sam Laguza, Cahaiba shot out to an early lead and looked to have the title in their grasp. But Belrose also have their fair share of talented players and fought their way back into the match. But Cahaiba weren't going to let this opportunity slip, and they steadied to wrap up their first ever New South Wales number 1 pennant flag, 84 shots to 68.
For divorcee Ian Monk, his self-funded campaign to reform the Family Law Act has become something of an obsession. He has spent the last 2.5 years lobbying for change.
The problem is where people start disputing over property, over children, over maintenance, over custody and access. They're the areas of dispute which I believe Australians are concerned about, and that they're the areas that need addressing.
Our politicians seem to agree. A joint parliamentary inquiry has been set up to investigate how the execution of the Family Law Act could be improved. In particular, it'll examine the adversarial nature of proceedings, custody and property disputes, and the role of family counselling.
Well, obviously I'm hoping it'll achieve widespread reform in so much as, in principle, a swing away from a system that uses lawyers, a system that's very expensive for our nation, both in terms of human resources and in terms of financial resources, to a system that conserves those resources.
Submissions from the general public will be accepted by the committee until the end of this month. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Until today, motorists keeping one eye on the parking police had to keep the other eye on only the meter's expired sign. But under new state legislation, the grey ghost can slug a driver for more than parking infringements.
They'll also be looking at vehicles and looking for vehicles which are either damaged, causing their headlights to be damaged, bald tyres, they might be looking at number plate offences, and they'll be able to issue tickets now for vehicles parked on a public street which violate any of those laws as well.
Constable Joe Watts says the parking officers are in a better position than other police to pick up car defects.
Because parking patrol officers are out there, they're dealing with vehicles on public streets all the time, and if a vehicle is parked and it isn't roadworthy, well then why shouldn't it be detected by them as well as by us?
While most people dread the brown bomber, many believe the new powers for the parking police make sense.
I think it's fair enough. You know, if they want to try and cut the road toll down or whatever, good luck to them.
Well, if they've got to do it, they've got to do it.
Yeah, they're the ones that see the cars. So, I mean, they're the ones that can do it. The police don't see the tyres as they're going along. You see a car going along, you can't tell whether it's bald or not.
Sometimes you get away with a small bald tyre, but maybe a small headlight crack, and it's going to be a lot different now.
In the Hunter, hundreds of gun owners have tried to beat the state government to the draw by applying for licences under the old laws. Maitland and Cessnock police stations report a rush of 200 applications last week, compared with usual figures of 50 a month for Cessnock and 10 to 20 for Maitland. And Senior Constable Tony O'Brien says there's also been a last-minute bolt for licences in Newcastle.
If we had about 30 applications the last 5 days, where we normally get about 4 applications a week.
He says he's confident the new firearms laws will mean less shootings in the region.
People who have had firearms at home and they've just been left there and forgotten about will now become aware that they're required to have a shooter's licence. If they don't want the firearm, there's now an amnesty for the next month. They can go along to their local police station and hand the weapon in.
Dan Harrison, a Mayfield gun owner and retailer, praises the new tighter legislation, saying it will lift the image of sports shooters who have been unfairly criticised in the past.
As far as the shooters go, they're just it's just a sport like any other sport.
With 60% of the Hunter suffering from some form of land degradation, the New South Wales Soil Conservation Service has been working to ensure that the region's natural resources are not literally eroded away. But in a state government shake-up, the service has been abolished and incorporated into the new Conservation and Land Management portfolio. Although the name may change, The service's regional director, John Butcher, says a hunter strategy has just been completed and he intends to follow it through.
We're going to use that strategy plan with the targets and actions as they are, specifically looking at all areas of land degradation.
Dr Diana Day from Newcastle University's Centre for Environmental Management says the changes could open the way for improvements in tackling the land degradation issue.
I think really we've got to look harder at land degradation in New South Wales, not just mapping it but doing something about it. So I'd like a stronger policy impetus in the research and policy development area for land degradation, salinisation in particular, the dryland salinisation problems.
But Bob Martin, the member for Port Stephens and Shadow Minister for Lands and Forests, has slammed the service's scrapping. Mr Martin says the Greiner government acted hastily and with little regard for the environment.
The people of New South Wales become the losers, and the Hunter Valley, there's loss from the beaches right through to the Upper Hunter, and every river and stream becomes a sandier and silted up place, and therefore it's to the detriment of the people of New South Wales.
John Tierney isn't too worried about hearsay. Some said Newcastle would never have a Liberal representative in the Senate. And talk of a goods and services tax being unworkable doesn't faze him either.
We have a ramshackle method of sales tax at the moment where you're paying 30% on some items and you're paying a much lower rate on other items. This will put on a uniform rate and will cover a wider range of things.
In the recent state election, Labor leader Bob Carr won an avalanche of support by hotly opposing any consumption tax. Speaking in Newcastle today, Senator Tierney said Australia was fast becoming Paul Keating's much publicised prediction as a banana republic, and radical changes are needed. The senator said a broad-based tax on goods and services would stop tax avoidance, and in cutting back on other forms of taxes, people would be encouraged to save.
Some would say it's political madness to run with such a tax. What do you think?
Well, we had Paul Keating being a fierce advocate of it in 1985 and didn't get his way. Countries like New Zealand have introduced it. Most of the OECD countries already have this tax in place, and in the case of New Zealand, it works very well.
The players' representative, former golfing great Jack Newton, was in a pensive mood as he arrived at the crisis meeting, unwilling to discuss what was on the agenda. Newton met senior Knights officials behind closed doors for almost 2 hours after being asked by the players to approach the club with their grievances. Then, late this afternoon, the shock announcement. First grade captain Michael Hagan arrived for training unaware of the turmoil. Halfback Steve Former was better informed but just as startled. Both coaches retreated into the clubhouse, shying away from the media attention. Neither man was willing to discuss the decision. Instead, McMahon issued a short written statement blaming circumstances beyond his control for the shock move. But Knights administrators were blaming the media. Reserve grade coach David Waite will take over the first grade duties for the remainder of the season. It was only 2 months ago that McMahon was re-signed by the club to a 2-year contract thought to be worth about $180,000. Since that time, though, the Knights have won just 2 games from 9 appearances and slumped to 12th on the league ladder. As the losses continued to mount, so too did rumours of disharmony within the club. Bruce Mackenzie, NBN News.